What's up, everyone, and welcome on back to the channel. I've been loving Daredevil Born Again. I think it is such a fantastic show, and it is truly such a joy to watch every single week, and it fully captures the magic of what Netflix started back in 2015. But even with great things, there is still plenty that Marvel can learn from the show, because it was almost one of their biggest failures that they could have ever had. So I wanted to dive into the troubles that they had while making the show, what they can learn from those troubles, what they're doing right now which will benefit them in the long run, and also look at this from not only the fans' perspective of the show, but also look at it from the studio's perspective, because in some ways, I get why they went down this route. But before we get into all of that, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I do deep dives on the film and TV industry and analyze trends and news about movies and TV. I am very small. I am trying to hit 400 this month. That is how tiny I am. So if you could help me out with that, I'd love to have you, but let's get into it. It's wild that Marvel had the biggest leg up with the show, having a solid hit, a dedicated fan base, and then they nearly shit the entire bed with it, allegedly. When Daredevil initially came to Netflix, it was an instant hit, focusing on the character of Matt Murdock, his relationships with Karen and Foggy, and having a very well-rounded villain like Kingpin. It was immensely successful, it had a great following, and it helped set the tone for the rest of the Marvel TV shows. And then Disney and Marvel saw all of this, and then they were like, what if we changed all that? Daredevil Born Again was supposed to be a very different series from the one that we actually got. There was a complete creative overhaul on this entire series with immense reshoots and reconfiguring the entire story. In October of 2023, it was announced that Daredevil Born Again was going to replace its head writers Chris Ord and Matt Corman to completely rework the series after initially starting in March of 2023. This was back when Marvel was reportedly making TV shows on the fly, not hiring showrunners, and instead leaving the series to be run by executives and relying on post-production and reshoots to fix what's not working, like they do with their movies. Which brings us to our first lesson. No shit. Of course you should not be running TV like movies. Why would these people think, after years of television showing us what works, Marvel thought they could do a better job creating 8 hours of television using the same methodology as a 2-hour movie? I personally would love to have that kind of confidence. We'll never know exactly what happened with the show before these reshoots, but there have been certain leaks and reports that detail parts of it, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the lessons that Marvel can learn. For instance, Daredevil Born Again was supposed to be more of a legal procedural drama, and Daredevil wasn't supposed to don his costume until episode 4. People did give this a lot of shit when it came out, which I totally get, but benefit of the doubt, looking at it from both sides, in Daredevil Born Again, the show that we did get, he does don his costume in the first episode, but only for like 10 minutes. He really doesn't wear it all that much in the entire series, and he doesn't wear it again until episode 6. So I personally think it was just blown a bit out of proportion, but it is wild that they saw all 3 seasons of Daredevil, and what they got from it was that they should make a courtroom drama. Like, what if we had Law and Order, but sometimes he decides to fight crime? And also, benefit of the doubt, I did love the courtroom drama of White Tiger. They did have something with this show. They didn't like completely hit the mark apparently, but they did have something there. And then there are reports that Deborah and Woll and Eldon Henson would not be returning as Karen and Foggy, and instead only Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio would be returning as Matt Murdock and Kingpin, which also brings us to our next point. Before we get into this lesson, I will say that this does sound very dumb on paper. Though, to defend them, I will say that, we all love Daredevil Born Again, and Karen is not really in this show all that much, and this is likely due to them having to rework this series. In episode 8 and 9 she does return, and that is apparently where the new showrunner Dario Scartapane had full creative control, and it was likely very difficult to rewrite this series and rework it from what they already shot and include her in that show. But I'm just saying, she hasn't been in it, and it still has been good. And then Foggy, he had a good day of work on this show. That's about it. But to also watch the entire Daredevil show where there is so much chemistry and character dynamics between Karen and Foggy and Matt, and then you want to decide that you don't want any of that. It feels like someone was trying to make this show as cheap as possible, and then they started cutting out characters that they thought weren't needed on at least the surface level. In my opinion, that is like someone wanting to adapt Harry Potter and trying to do so without Hermione or Ron, and only getting the rights to Harry Potter and Voldemort. You need these characters for this story. It's much bigger than just a hero and a villain kind of story. And Marvel really needs to learn this. Yes, these are superhero storylines, but people fell in love with Daredevil not just for the violence or the cool ass hallway one-shot scenes, but also for the on-screen friendships and relationships that Daredevil has, and they need to apply that to everything going forward. And this next part is more of a rant, but there is also the story where Jon Bernthal walked away from Daredevil Born Again, claiming it wasn't the version of Frank Castle that he was interested in doing. Now, you could read this and think that the past writers were absolutely completely fumbling the character of Frank, they had no idea what they were doing, but once again, to give them the benefit of the doubt, because we don't know exactly what went on, maybe Jon Bernthal was wrong. Hot take here, and I say this as a huge fan of Jon Bernthal. I think he is one of the next greats. I love nearly everything he is in. I love what he has done with the Punisher character, but I am cautious to believe that he hated this version of this character because it wasn't accurate, because I personally don't think he has a full grasp on who the Punisher is, mostly because he said he has to honor this character because of how much it means to law enforcement and military who don the Punisher skull.
Look, it's a character that's resonated with the law enforcement and military community, and that means everything to me. There's guys who have gone and fought for this country with the Punisher skull in their body armor.
Look, I'm not a massive comic fan. I don't read everything, but I do read enough to know that any cop who dons the Punisher skull, they definitely turn that body cam off at very convenient times, and there was literally a whole story written to try to dissuade cops from idolizing the Punisher. So I'm gonna take his criticism with a little grain of salt. The problem is we don't know exactly how they portrayed him, so I don't want to use this piece as proof that this is the reason why these writers were justly fired, because we just don't know how he was initially portrayed, and I don't think that we can trust Jon Bernthal's opinion in this very small instance. But luckily, Marvel and Disney did see this series and knew that it was headed in the wrong direction and made the right course correction. They should learn it's okay to put things on pause as long as you create something of value and make it better. Luckily, in the world of TV, you don't necessarily have to hit hard deadlines like they do with films. You can delay it, and it is much easier to delay it than it is with films. This is why TV is different than movies. Hopefully they do learn from this, as they did not learn this lesson from their past projects like with She-Hulk, where its VFX was incredibly rushed, or with Secret Invasion when they rushed that entire show because they were behind schedule and they could have lost actors. They did luckily pause this show and course correct it in this very instance, but in the past they haven't, and they need to continue to do so if they have to. And you do have to ask why they needed this course correction in the first place, and I want to approach this as not only a fan of this show, but also as someone who understands where they might be coming from the entertainment business side of things. So let's look at it from the studio side, from the Marvel side, from the Disney side, from the side of getting people to watch it on Disney+. They probably knew that Daredevil had a baked-in audience, and they wanted to bring the show back, but they didn't want it to live in the shadow of the Netflix show. And by that, I mean they probably didn't want to release a show that was a continuation of a show that they had only 3 seasons of 10 years ago. They were probably hesitant that it would draw new potential viewers away, since they couldn't bank on those new viewers catching up with the past 3 seasons. And then they also couldn't bank on the past audiences tuning in either, solely due to nostalgia. Just look at other past revival shows like Heroes Reborn or The X-Files. They likely wanted this to be a familiar reset, similar to Star Wars The Force Awakens, where you bring back certain elements to bring in the old viewers, but your intention is to ultimately create new viewers, which is why they were wanting to title it Born Again and adapt that storyline, since it's kind of a fresh start, even though they did adapt that storyline in season 3 already. So I understand where their mentality was. I don't agree with it, but I understand it, especially from a business point of view. But what I hope that they learn from this entire experience is to understand what you are already adapting and creating. And I am not saying you should listen to fans. I think that is a very slippery slope, which leads to very mid storytelling. But Disney and Marvel should have really done some qualitative research in understanding what this entire show is about. It's not a procedural show. Daredevil was not a show where he takes a new case every week. It was a very character-driven show, and I think Disney and Marvel wanted to create a show that was a familiar reset, not set in the Netflix canon, and also be a show that could go on for years, similar to like a highbrow Arrow or a Smallville. But they did not do that. They did not fully understand the show, and because of that, they had to do a complete creative overhaul. spending millions of dollars reworking and reshooting the show to create the great show that we have now. This first season of Born Again is likely not making any profit because they had to spend so much money rewriting it, reshooting it, hiring back actors, firing actors, and then going back to the initial original actor like they did with the character of Vanessa. I fully don't believe they're making money on this show. They could have made money, but they didn't really understand the initial show, or they were simply too business-minded about the entire thing. So I hope when they look at other past Marvel shows to revamp, like perhaps Jessica Jones, or Luke Cage, or that might be it. But when they look at those shows, I hope they fully understand why they were good shows to begin with and why people originally tuned in. And I don't just want to shit on the original writers of Matt Corman and Chris Ord. We don't know if Disney Marvel mandated this initial idea of Daredevil Born Again, and then they just came in and pitched on it and were hired. They were hired to do a job, and they likely did an okay job since it is reported that they did shoot 6 episodes, and then they decided they needed to be reconfigured and reshot, and the episodes that we got were still good. We don't know the full extent of these reshoots, but they did set a foundation so that when the new showrunner Dario Scardapane could come in, he could build the show off of that foundation that they did create. Another thing I hope they learn in their development process is to envision these shows as multiple seasons. Daredevil Born Again has already been greenlit for season 2 and is filming right now. There have been a few leaks online about the new suit and how Deborah is fully back as Karen Page, but in a way, Marvel is already letting people know that they believe in this show and that they want you to tune into it. They're not gonna Netflix it up and cancel it after 1 season. Marvel Television has been very stupid in my opinion in their entire TV department, envisioning entire television shows as one-off limited series. Only one of their live action shows has a season 2. That is just so stupid in television. It really showcases that they really thought they could develop these shows as long-form movies, and that is just not how television works, and that is not how it is successful either. Television shows usually reach their audience peak in later seasons. That is just how television works. No one was talking about Parks and Rec solely based off of their first season, or Severance, which has had a huge growth in season 2. The shows that are immediate hits in their first seasons are unicorns, and they are not the norm. Not every show can be Westworld. But to build that audience, to build that foundation, you need to start seeing these TV shows as shows that can go on for multiple years and not just 1 season. It feels stupid to have to point that out, but that is how Marvel has been acting since their TV expansion in 2019. It's literally taken them 5 years to figure out how a television model works that was set up 60 years ago, that more seasons are good for TV. This would have helped them out on so many shows that seem kinda directionless when you think about them as long-form TV series like Echo or Hawkeye or Moon Knight. We have yet to see how any of these shows are coming back because they were solely envisioned to only help out their movies and not be TV shows, which is what they are. They are television shows. People come back season after season for these characters. They don't want these one-offs, and that is not how you build an audience. So I hope that Marvel learns from this and develops their shows to be multi-season shows instead of being these one-offs that are only made to help grow their movie slate and grow their universe. And that is what I think that Marvel should learn from Daredevil Born Again. Please let me know if you think there's anything else that they should learn, or if you just love the show, let me know. I fucking love talking about Daredevil. I love this show so much. So drop a comment below and please subscribe if you haven't already, and please be sure to like this video. It really does help push these videos out in the algorithm to more people than just yourselves and find a new audience. So I appreciate it all. If you subscribe, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much.